All right, so we have a spotlight section that we added 2 or 3 reports ago. And a part of what we want to do this time is focus on using the SMART framework to develop support activities in Virginia's ISP. Part of what we want to do is make sure that the outcomes and the activities are measurable. And so using the SMART concept, we're going to walk through a few slides and kind of talk about how the SMART framework actually applies to what we do in Virginia for the ISP. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So you want to make sure that your wording under the SMART framework is explicit in what you are trying to accomplish, that it's quantifiable in some way, that it's realistic and within reach, that it's significant and aligned with broader efforts, and that it's time-bound with a deadline. So we want to figure out how that plays out in our ISP. So we're going to use SMART to do the development. So we're going to take an example desired outcome, which is Kayla tries more foods in order to have more variety in her diet. Okay, so that would be the outcome from the shared plan. We want a simple, observable statement that describes what will be attempted, and we want to be specific. So Kayla cooks dinner, right? That's something you can observe. You can observe Kayla cook dinner. So this is the simple support activity. But we need to go further than just stating the simple support activity. We have to make it measurable, and we have to define what type of support we're providing and what we're trying to accomplish here. So the ISP has space for entering a measure. And so we want to choose the type of support that we're going to provide. And there are 3 types of support described in the DD waiver manual. So there's routine support, there's skill building support, and there's health and safety support. So you have to make a decision and choose one, right? You want to pick one type of support for the development of that outcome. And remember that a person can have more than one activity per outcome. So if you're going to do one support that's routine and one support that's skill building, you would enter 2 separate rows under that outcome so that you would be able to kind of detail out in different measurable ways how you're accomplishing those supports. All right, so we have some examples here. This is the measure. So if we're talking about a routine support, we're really just wanting to know on a routine basis that the activity is occurring. So it's not complex. You basically take the activity statement and you add the frequency on the end. So Kayla cooks dinner weekly through her next annual meeting. So the instructions will talk about how staff support her to cook dinner. We are not trying to develop skills here. We're just ensuring that the activity is happening at the expected frequency. For the second one, if you decide, well, Kayla really wants to learn to cook. She wants to develop her ability to cook, and we're going to focus on skill building. So we have the example of Kayla gathers 3 needed menu items for dinner without support at least once per week for 6 weeks in a row. So this is the most complex measure out of the 3. It's the one that is required in many services, and there has to be at least one, but it really should be based around the person. So if somebody has a lot of interests and they're very active, you would expect to see more skill development or more skill building activities in that person's plan. Skill building is really based on that person's gifts and talents and what they want to learn. And we do encourage providers to keep it very simple into a yes and no format so that progress is easier to determine. So did Kayla gather 3 needed menu items today without support? Yes or no? And so picking one specific step, focusing on that, collecting data on that in a very simple way is what we're trying to get at with skill development. And then health and safety support, Kayla follows her mealtime protocol daily to ensure proper nutrition until it is removed by her physician. So what limits the time around health and safety support is that a qualified professional makes the decision that that support is no longer needed. So it would not be the residential provider that says, hey, we can stop your seizure protocol now. It would be a qualified professional who would make that determination, and the plan should reflect that that decision and where that decision comes from. Okay, so looking at the 3 examples that we just went over, are they achievable? So can Kayla get support every week with cooking her dinner? Can she gather 3 needed menu items for dinner without support at least once per week for 6 weeks in a row? So is that something that Kayla can do? So it may be worded differently for John or for Sarah, right? It could sound different based on who that person is, what their talents and gifts are, and what they want to learn and where they're at in terms of learning. So it's really shaping something that Kayla agrees to. Yes, that makes sense for me. Yes, that's achievable for me, and I want to work on it. And the same thing for following the protocol. Does that match the type of support the person needs in order to be healthy and safe? Is it relevant? So for each of these, does it look like the language for these makes sense for the activity of cooking dinner and makes sense in terms of whether it's a routine support, a skill building support, or a health and safety support? Does it help the person have the life they want? Based on what their outcome is, right? And then is it time bound? And so as I mentioned, for routine supports, does the measure include how often the activity will occur through the target date? For skill building, it adds that criterion. So we're really looking at what will be observed, what skill will be observed, and how long it will be observed in order to ensure learning. So that time-bound measure adds a criterion in the skill building support that's unique to skill building. And then for health and safety, the end of that is going to be when the qualified professional says that support is no longer needed. So that time-bound criterion is different depending on the type of support and the type of measure that's developed.